secretary. Best.
Oh, well, welcome to Let's Get Writing Author Reads. This is the part of the show that can be so much fun because we're not on any time constraints and we like to have fun. And my guest today is author Harry Ingram, and he's the writer of recitations and wonderful stories. Harry, welcome. This is his book.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. Now, don't be talking. Don't be talking, Harry. I do this every week. Okay, so, we did an interview and we talked about different inspirations and all of that serious stuff about your recitations. But I want to get into the trenches here. I want to hear you reading way more recitations, and I just want to see what inspires you. So why don't you set this up and open it up and take us on a recitation?
Absolutely. Mostly inspiration comes from family. Most like family and personal events and things that happen in life. And it's a lot of fun to grasp at that stuff. I done a recitation there. Well, the name of the book, Don't Be Talkin. That's from like I know some people that are a little older and more surly and would say, don't be talking. You ask them anything, don't be talking. What's the weather like? Don't be talking. So negative, but humor in that as well. So that's where I draw a lot of inspiration from. That particular character that I developed, Great Uncle John. I had so much fun with him that I wrote another recitation based on the same character, and then to even further it along a little, because Aunt Suze is mentioned in there. She's the loving wife of Great Uncle John. I even decided to write one about her, based on again a good friend of mine. His mom is elderly, but bakes Tbuns almost daily. And I've tasted these Tbuns and they are lovely. But because she has so many, and there's always Tbuns around, I said, boy, there's something in there to write a recitation on. So I grabbed Great Uncle John's wife and pulled her out of that recitation and built a story of her own called Trouble with Tbuns. And I'll throw that one out there for you now if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, I would love to hear it. I grew up on Tbuns. We'll talk about that after. You tell your story first.
Absolutely. So it's called Trouble with Tbuns. Raising Tbuns. I loves them, I do. Especially the ones that are baked by Aunt Suze. Sure, just last week I got about 4 for clearing some snow away from her door. But keep that to yourself, and I'll tell you why. She had to give them to me on the sly. See, a few years back in her infinite wisdom, Aunt Suze developed a bartering system. It started real small between family and friends, or perhaps trade a dozen for a meal of cod's heads. There's no one around who could bake 'em so good. Once you traded 3 dozen for 2 quart of wood. From a gallon of paint right down to split peas, she even bartered for whiskey for Uncle John's tea. And she handed them out for work done on her car, although you might think that's going too far. But then Sophie Brown from over in the gut loved the idea, said she wanted a cut. So Soph passed the recipe, yes, she passed it with pride, as long as she got her percentage on the side. Then Soph passed it on to her friend on the hill, and soon an old lady Tbun network was built. And it wasn't long before the whole town was buzzing about the phenomenon of Tbuns from Aunt Suze's oven. They brought them to bake sales. They brought them to wakes. At church, Suze dropped 2 in the collection plate. They used them to get the leak patched in her roof, and to get the supplies, she paid with buns for that too. All hands were happy, enjoying the taste, eating them up, not a crumb did they waste. All the work got done, and the whole town got fed. Sure, there's no better marriage, not even newlyweds. Now, the whole operation was chugging along till they noticed that something was definitely wrong. Jack's convenience was hurting, things looking rough. See, no one were buying, they were trading for stuff. And Timothy's Hardware noticed their sales were down, which brought on a panic all over the town. Poor Marg closed the bakery, put a sign up for rent. She couldn't sell a cookie, not for even 5 cents. So with the town now in shambles, now this wasn't fun, so they called a town meeting to see what could be done. All of the problems they had to discuss, Aunt Sue's apologised, never wanted a fuss. First there were raisins, they were low in supply, they even dried all the grapes so no one could make wine. And the economy was hurting, it was hurting a lot. So I heard on the news that the dollar had dropped. But the clinic was busy, said old Dr. Collins, because half the town had cholesterol problems. Those Tbuns were tasty, you can't dispute that. They were block full of taste, and block more full of fat. After a little discussion, a decision was made. The bartering was stopped. Yes, they'd give up the trade. Those little old ladies now don't bake a thing. They said goodbye to their bun baking ring. Well, it took a little while, but now order's restored, and if you want Tbuns, well, you go to the store. But if late at night when you're out on the go, you might see Aunt Sue's with her knitting bag in tow. But don't expect socks or wool hats or mitts. See, Aunt Sue's don't really even know how to knit. Well, she kept her promise. There's no Tbuns at all. But why she's some hand to make. Chocolate coconut snowballs. There you go.
Oh, you hit all the good ones because we are a Tbun culture here, especially with raisins. And the chocolate coconut snowballs, another Newfoundland favorite.
Yes, for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, those ladies were at it. So how did you, so you got the idea you were going to do something for Tbuns, and then you like put this twist on it. These ladies were running the ring.
It just starts. Sometimes you start writing with no real direction in mind. Just like, yeah, this old lady makes a lot of Tbuns, and then there you go. Just kind of, yeah, that's good. Oh yes, I like that. I like that. And you just, sometimes it just comes to you.
Yeah, and that may be the gift. That may be the gift, Harry. Oh my goodness, that was nice. And when I grew up, there was, if you ever didn't feel well, you'd climb onto Nan's lap and you'd get a little bit of tea, and she'd always have Tbuns. And it was Nan Taylor's Tbuns, like the best recipe. And I love that. That brings a great memory to me.
Send a recipe along now. I'd love to make them.
You'd love to make them. Would you send them in to me on the bus?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'll pick them up. And you also said to me, and you said that you toned down your accent for the show, for the understanding of the people that I don't have subtitles going here yet, or they probably will be when this goes up, but that would confuse it even further.
I have to be very careful while I'm on live on different venues and stuff. I do have a very thick accent from Placentia Bay, but my job being in sales, I need people to understand me, so I can kind of turn it off or turn it down at least.
Yeah, because you said thick, not tick. Wouldn't you normally say I got a tick accent?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm just checking.
But I do enjoy my heritage, and I'm very proud of it. I'm proud of my culture. So I have no problem turning it back on again either.
Oh, well, I'm going to get you to do that before the show is over, and I'll join you. I share your pride, and I think our culture is amazing, how it was created and how it continues. And speaking of continuing, let's move on to another reading. I think you're going to pull at our heartstrings next, are you not?
I suppose I could do that. I guess I will. The next one is something that's very, very, very close to me. It's the first one that I ever wrote, as we spoke about earlier. I wrote it for my dad. It's called Hands of Time. It's just after Dad passed away. I had a thought in my head and had to write it, and I don't believe I've ever performed this without saying that this was a tribute to my dad, Freeman Ingram, and also the greatest man I've ever known. So anyway, I'll perform this now. So,
all right, take it away.
Hands of Time. I watched him on that day as he left this world. I sat there holding his hand and watched him take his final breath. His hands were rough and calloused from a lifetime of hard work. From the moment we take our first breath, so begin the hands of time. There's something unseen, not often thought of, maybe even magical in the touch of a hand. From the first moment of life's journey, our hand is often placed in a parent's hand for comparison of size. But it's so much more to comparison. It's as if the strings of the heart extend all the way to the fingertips. As more time passes, we meet so many along the way. Handshakes hold so many different meanings. It's a sign of respect when meeting an old friend or business associate. It is congratulatory for occasions like the birth of a child, a wedding, or any other of life's accomplishments. It's a gesture of condolence as we comfort others in the loss of a loved one. I was nervous on that day when I held her hand while on bended knee. Then before I knew it, there we were, together at the altar, hands joined as one. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. A feeling I'll never forget. We grow and learn as time travels forward. Hold Dad's hand now, I say before crossing the street. I held my 3-year-old daughter's hand as we jumped simultaneously from a 4-inch high curb. The simplest thing gave both of us so much pleasure as we carefully made our way. Tick-tock, the hands of time move along, carrying us with it. So many emotions follow with us as life's story unfolds. And there's so much of this life story left untold. It is with anticipation we watch our sons and daughters continue to grow, making decisions that will affect their future, and even placing their hands in the hand of their chosen life partner as they prepare for their vows. Life travels on, and eventually it will come full circle. As my circle continues, I reflect on that day, the day that his circle of life completed and his hands of time stood still. Yes, I watched him on that day as he left this world. I sat there, holding his hand, and watched him take his final breath. His hands were rough and calloused from a lifetime of hard work. Rest easy. You're home now, Dad. Thank you.
Harry, you must have had a wonderful relationship with your father.
Absolutely. It was very, very nice. In spite of a lot of hard work that I had to do with him that I didn't really want to, but that happens.
That happens. I think that's part of our culture too. You're not going to get away from that. It's like, in fact, I mean, one thing that I always remembered, when you needed something, well, you called cousin so-and-so or this one or that one, and they'd come along and they'd help you and you get things done. So then I moved to the mainland and I had gotten a house and I was going to fix it up. And I thought, well, I'll just call so-and-so or so-and-so and they'll come over. And then it was like, no, you don't do that. Call a carpenter. You call. I said, well, I mean, we got this big project on the go. We can't just give them a call to come over and help us. And I had to, I'm not saying that doesn't happen there, but it was not this, it wasn't kind of the same way that we did before we, of course, family members can come and do this and that. And it's just something, again, in our culture, the way we chip in and share. And it is kind of nice. Okay, well, that was a sentimental one, and thank you very much for reading that so beautifully, and also showing us that you don't just write kind of recitations, you actually tell stories as well. Okay, give me a little more insight onto that. How does that become a part of what you do? Has it always been that way?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, that being the first one, I didn't know if I was destined for all sentimental pieces, but I guess humor came out in there as well. So there was no real aim. I just kind of done what I like doing and look back at the product. Basically, it may sound a little odd, but that's about it.
No, I think sometimes it is that way. Okay, here's something I want to do before we're going to do one more with you. But before we do that, I want to read. I'm not going to read the whole thing because this is really for you to read, but I'm going to read one page and you're going to tell me how I do. Because I was sitting at home reading this and saying some of them out loud. I was like, no, I might have picked an easy one. This one's called Havoc at the North Pole. And you're only going to get the first page of it. And if you want the rest of it, well, you know how you can do that.
There you go.
Okay. This is all about labor disputes at the North Pole and that the fact that they're never fun. So I don't know where your mind was when you wrote this one, but poor Santa. Havoc at the North Pole. 'Twas early October, up at the North Pole. Months of preparing had taken their toll. The oldest of the bunch were both tuckered out. Yes, Donner and Blitzen, I'm talking about. All tired out from years of hard work, both getting older, joints starting to hurt. At the annual meeting, they developed a plan for when Santa gets back from Newfoundland. Stumbled in the last verse. How'd I do?
That's great. You're hired.
I'm hired. Okay, if you can't make the gig,
From stage to stage with special invited guest.
there, yeah, I'll come. I'll even write something. But you might have to coach me. All right, enough of me. But you know what? I wanted to do that because I wanted to do that with you because I'm really caught up in the energy of what you're doing, and it's so much fun. And actually, I love this book, and I love the culture that you're creating. So where are we going now? What adventure are we going on, Harry, for the last one? Hello, are you frozen? I don't know. I may have taken Harry out. Hello. This is where the pressure is on me to fill until he comes to life again. He may have to pop out and come back in. Hello. Hello, Harry. Well, folks, don't go away. Harry's coming back. Here he is. These surprising moments. Oh, well. In the meantime, I do happen to know the last piece that Harry is going to read. It's about a talking moose. If you're not from Newfoundland, I'm just going to pop this out here and see if he'll come back in. If you're not from Newfoundland, you may not understand the scale or magnitude of moose. Now, I don't know what this is about, but a talking moose is always a favorite character in storybooks with children here, and one that I read a considerable number of times with my children. It was, I can't remember the name, but so much fun to bring life to these characters. And there's another author I had on the show a few years ago, and he does a series of books about Morris the Moose, and I should get him back because Blair Osmond does an amazing job at creating characters through moose. And again, moose, if you don't know, are incredibly huge, and they can show up at the most inopportune times. And there's also the issue of moose management and getting the license and not poaching. So I'm not sure what he's covered in this particular story, but I'm quite tempted to read it. Let's see if Harry's trying to reach me on the cell phone. Harry, are you there? Let me text him. This is real. This is it, folks. We're gonna get it. We're gonna get to Harry one way or another. We'll see what happens, and if I get back a response. So shall I begin? This one's called Jerome. So not having read it before, I'll do my best. Now, old Skipper Bill hove off his chair, listening to the stories and lies. The young fellas talked about poaching moose and jigging a few fish on the sly. Each story told was more far-fetched than the one told before. Skipper Bill had enough and said, "Listen now, boys, I've got a fine tale in store." 'Twas the early 70s, or was it my early 70s? I really can't remember that far. When I took me boat and went out on the pond, I figured I'd stay there till dark. With me old bamboo pole and me tub of worms, I ventured a good ways offshore. It was just a small flat with no motor at all, with hole pins in the gunnels and oars. Well, half a dozen trout was all that I caught, but I really could not have cared less. With the water so calm and the sun in my face, it seemed a good time to rest. Just the sound of the birds in that crisp morning air and a gentle wind rustling the trees. With a full day ahead to finish me catch, I began to drift off to sleep. Then all of a sudden, a gunshot blast. Sure, I nearly jumped out of my skin, and two more followed right after, and a voice yelling, "Shoot him again!" Then out of the woods, like a shot from the gun, came a moose looking round for protection. He looked all around, looked up and then down like a CFA looking for directions. Well, the thought crossed my mind to grab the oars and head to the other side, but as I looked around, I soon realized they were carried away with the tide. Well, the moose left the shore and swam out to me, and here I had nowhere to go. And what his intentions were with me, I didn't think I wanted to know. It wasn't what I expected at all. As I stared in the face of this moose, he seemed to say, "Buddy, I need some help." And I said, "Yes, buddy, me too." And then, with his rack, took the painter in tow and dragged me safe to the shore. I said, "Bye, you just saved my skin. So I guess it's now time to save yours." So I knew a shortcut back to the truck, as the moose followed close behind. When we got there, I motioned to the pan of the truck, and pretty soon, in it he climbed. Lit down flat just like he was dead, sprawled off in the pan of me truck, passed by hunters with their guns and their vests, quite jealous of my fortune and luck. Well, back to my home we soon arrived, soon enough. I pulled round the back of the house. As soon as he seen we were all alone, he quickly hopped up and got out. "That was a close one," this moose says to me. That was just before I passed out. And then coming to see it wasn't a dream, I was gone for another round. I finally woke up and came to grips, then started to regain my composure. I thanked him and said, "Now be on your way." He said, "Not till moose season's over." To argue with a beast of this monstrous size, I didn't even bother to try. I just cleared a spot in the back of the shed, and now that should do for the night. Well, what a commotion about 2:45 that brought me right to my feet. I went downstairs and looked out on the deck at this moose covered up in a sheet. And not just a sheet he had wrapped around his head and tangled up all in his points. 'Twas a clothesline and all, with wool socks, pants, and bras, all snarled up with patio lights. He lowered his head and apologized to me. He said, "Would you mind if I came in the house? It's awful lonely out there in the shed. I promise I'll be quiet as a mouse." I let him squeeze in, perhaps a stun thing to do. It's a good thing we got double doors. He wasn't stood up for a second and a half before sprawling on the hardwood floor. He looked like a bit like Bambi on steroids, the way Bambi sprawled off on the ice. He finally got up on the daybed, with the daybed now nowhere in sight. The next morning he was hungry, and I didn't know what I should give him to eat. He didn't like the bottles of sweet mustard pickles, nor did he like the bottles of meat. So moose are vegetarians, you see, so my bottles of meat were no use. I couldn't offer bottled rabbit or chur, and heaven forbid, bottled moose. With his diet all sorted, oh, I missed a chapter, a verse. With his hoof, he pointed out to the backyard. He said, "There's a deal for you, skipper. You won't need to mow the lawn as long as I'm here. Just don't try to feed me them flippers." With his diet all sorted and lodging somewhat for work, I tried not to be late. Then break time, I stopped to check the news. There's a moose in Kitty Vitty Lake. It wasn't long before I arrived on the scene, with the wildlife officer there too. I said, "Buddy, he's only getting a drink. It's not like he's in the McDonald's drive-through." Then after a while, we started agreeing, and we figured out what would be best. He was no longer allowed out parading around town without a huge orange vest. So there you have it. He stayed for a while and everything worked out just fine. He ate all the grass out in our backyard and his antlers we used for clothesline. He went back in the woods when the hunters came out. But I don't think that it ends all here. He's become a good friend of the family and visits us every year. Now, the young fellas couldn't believe it at all. They thought he was drinking the juice. There was no way in the world that this could be true. I mean, really? A talking moose? Bill just smiled and looked at his watch, said, I think that it's time I head home. For the last 10 minutes, my ride's been outside. It's a big bull moose named Jerome. Oh my gosh. A wonderful one. Well, you didn't get to hear the author, Harry, and he's just connecting with me now. Stay with me. Try an internet connection's fine. It just dropped. Resetting my modem. My sincere apologies. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get this sorted. Okay, Harry, once we get this going, you're going to have to write, as I have been saying throughout the whole show, you are going to have to write a recitation about the time you were on Let's Get Writing. Thanks, everyone. I don't think Harry's going to get back in, and I hope I did him proud reading his story. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Let's Get Writing presents Let's Get Talking. And I think I've talked enough. And we'll get Harry on again. Let me know if you're enjoying his recitations. I'll have him back, and we'll finish the show. Have a great day, and thanks for being with us. Bye now.